All right, so today I think I'm going to talk about some mistakes that I made in my preparations and while hiking the Appalachian Trail. The reason I'm doing this is a good friend of mine the other day sent me a link to an article that another AT hiker had written addressing 3 mistakes that they had made on the Appalachian Trail, and I certainly made my fair share of mistakes. I've got a little list here of a half a dozen of them that I'm going to talk about. And one of them, probably the biggest one, I will save towards the end, even though we are getting a little bit of hint of right now of what that was all about. But before I attack my ego and confess the mistakes that I made. Let me talk a little bit about some of the things that I avoided, some mistakes that I avoided. I did do a lot of research, and there's lots of mistakes that people make on the Appalachian Trail. So I did my research, and that helped me avoid some things. And one of the things that I avoided was getting the norovirus. And a lot of people that I know on the trail indeed did get quite sick and with the norovirus. And in fact, one evening at one of the campsites where I was at, a hiker had to be emergency evacuated. The rangers had to come up and take her out. So, but yeah, I did my best to avoid it. And one of the things that I did was I avoided shelters. I very rarely would I actually get in a shelter. I would pitch my tent on most evenings. Now there are certain places on the trail, in particular the Smokies and some other places along the way where they were encouraging, if not mandating, that hikers stay in the shelters for various reasons. And so when they were requesting that hikers stay in the shelters, I assumed that it was for good reasons, and I stayed in the shelters in those cases. But by avoiding that, I avoided a lot of close contact with other hikers and more opportunities to transmit the norovirus. And then another thing, I paid a really close attention to the food that I was eating. Lots of people want to share food, either fellow hikers or trail magic, and while I did take advantage of some food that might have been offered by a fellow hiker, and definitely from some of the trail angels, if I thought that the food that was being offered had been handled a lot by other people, I avoided that. And ideally, from trail magic, I tried to stick to things that were already were wrapped up and sealed, and not out in the open. So I was fortunate enough, I was cautious and fortunate enough that I didn't make the mistake of being careless with the food that I was getting from others, and I did manage to avoid the norovirus. Now, another mistake that I was warned about, and watching other people's videos, is getting caught up in the vortex. The trail community is very tight, and you make friends along the way. You might go into a town like Damascus and say, "Hey, this is a really cool place. I've made some friends here, and they're going to stay for an extra day, so maybe I'll take a 0 too." And then you keep enjoying yourself, and the next thing you know, maybe you've spent 2 or 3 days with a new tramily or something like that. A tramily, for those of you who don't know, is the way people on the trail refer to the community of people. It's a combination of trail and family. And so you meet a lot of people. And I had people that I met on the way that I would consider my tramily, but I didn't let them suck me into either hiking at their pace, either increasing or decreasing my pace, so that I could stay with that tramily. And in fact, most of the time I was on the trail, I didn't hike with other people. There were a couple of days where there were some people that I, for whatever reason, I essentially was hiking with on the trail most of the day. But most days, in fact, there were a few days where I didn't see another single thru hiker while I was hiking. Now, when you went to the campsites, that's where people tended to congregate in the evening, so I would see them. My dog is outside barking. Smoozer, that's Smoozer. Smoozer, no. Smoozer, Smoozer, no barking. Get in here. Okay, all right, now. So, yeah, that was another mistake that I avoided. That was a common mistake that I had other people talk about before I was on the trail. Now let's, now that I've patted myself on the back, we'll get to the mistakes that I actually did make. And like I said, probably my biggest mistake, I'll save that for the end. But timing and when to take the hike. So this is probably another what I would consider a big mistake was actually before I got on the trail and my planning and preparations. I first started thinking about hiking the Appalachian Trail almost 25 years ago. But for whatever reasons, I had a career at the time when I first started considering the Appalachian Trail. I was an arts administrator, and I didn't want to interrupt my career by taking several months off in a row, and to do something like that, I would have had to have probably just quit a job and then hope that I could find another job once I completed the trail. And in hindsight now, as I look back, especially there was a period, especially in the late 1990s, when I was, in my, I think probably 40s and late 40s. And it would have been a lot easier for me to hike the trail then. But actually, I think it might have actually benefited my career to take some time off and sort of get away from what I was doing. That was not what I would consider a real productive time in my career, and I was having some other issues. And really, I think that if I had just resigned from the job that I had at that time and just taken off on the trail, a chance for me to reassess things and then come back fresh, a few months later, I actually think that might have benefited me. But instead, I kept waiting for what I thought would be an ideal time. And I was always working. And so really the only ideal time, or the time where it wouldn't interfere with my work schedule, was when I retired. And so I was forced to hike the trail at a much older age, and so it was a lot more difficult on me. So yeah, I think that was probably what I might consider definitely my first mistake, if not one of my biggest mistakes. Now, another area where people make a lot of mistakes is in their gear. And actually, this is let me pat myself on the back again. Digger, you just moved my camera, but that's all right. Let me pat myself on the back again because I actually did a pretty good job about not packing my fears, and my pack weight from day one was pretty reasonable, and I had very, very few gear changes or getting rid of things. I didn't really get rid of a lot of stuff on the trail that I didn't need because I used almost everything I packed. So I did a pretty good job of not packing my fears. I wasn't ultralight by any means. My pack was typically between 25 and 30 pounds, depending upon how much food I was carrying at the time, food and water. So some people would consider that, not, definitely not ultralight. But for me, it was everything that I used and not much more. So I did a pretty good job there. However, in terms of my gear, there was one thing, and I did a video when I was talking about my gear before I went on the hike, and one area that I did have some concern, and that was with the sleeping bag that I started the trail with. I was concerned that it might not be sufficient because it was a 10-year-old bag, and I had taken it on lots of hikes. I'd hiked the Inca Trail a couple of times with it, and Mount Kilimanjaro, and I'd been to Patagonia and hiked with it and all around. But I'd also done a shakedown hike with it a few months before I was scheduled to hike the Appalachian Trail. And on that shakedown hike, a couple of days, it actually got quite cold and down into the 20s. And I was kind of chilly, even though that sleeping bag had a comfort rating of 20, I think 21 comfort degrees comfort rating. But it was indeed an old sleeping bag, and I had made the mistake of, when I wasn't hiking with it, I kept it in its compression bag so that the down stayed compressed, the whole time that I had it in storage, and that reduces the insulation quality of the sleeping bag. And also, as I said, I'd been all around the world and used it quite a bit, and I had never washed it. And over time, it picks up oils from your body and stuff like that, and that also reduces the insulation qualities of a sleeping bag. So if I had not stored it in a compressed state and washed it and basically just taken better care of it, it probably would have sufficed. But I didn't do that. And there were a couple of nights before I got to the Smokies where it actually got down into the teens. And I was pretty cold that night. And as I was approaching the Smoky Mountains, they were forecasting some severe weather, the cold temperatures, snow, and lots of precipitation. And so I was really concerned. I was really concerned that I would have problems with the sleeping bag. So when I got to Fontana, the Fontana Marina, actually, there were a couple of other hikers that I had met along the way, and they said that they were thinking about possibly getting a shuttle into Gatlinburg. They were wanting to do some things, and there was an REI in Pigeon Forge, which is just not far, a shuttle bus ride from Gatlinburg. And so I went in with them, and I exchanged and got another sleeping bag. So and then in addition to the mistake of not taking care of my original sleeping bag, the bag that I got, I really got one that was a little bit warmer than I needed. It was nice in the Smokies. I was nice and toasty in those cold, snowy nights in the Smoky Mountains with this bag that had actually a 15-degree comfort rating. But once I was out of the Smokies and it started to warm up a little bit, that was a lot more than I needed. So in a way, that was like another mistake that I made with my gear. But my sleeping bag was really the only kind of gear mistake that I can say that I made. Now, just in terms of my next mistake that I want to talk about is just sort of like my mindset while hiking. You play little mind games with yourself when you're hiking. Especially when you're out on the trail all by yourself. But the Appalachian Trail, you're either going up or you're going down. And sometimes it's quite steep up and quite steep down. And when you're going up, I'm going to have to get my dogs to stop barking. Hang on. Okay, sorry about that. I shut the door so the dogs couldn't go out. Are you going to bark while you're in here too? Anyway, they have imaginary squirrels out there that they like to bark at. Anyway, as I was mentioned, on the Appalachian Trail, you're either going up or down, and sometimes it's quite steep in both directions. But as I would hiking, especially when I was going uphill, it's different challenges going up and going down. When you're going up, it's a cardio thing. You just get tired. You lose your breath if you're going at too fast of a pace, or even if you're not going at that fast of a pace. It's a really good cardio workout, and it puts a lot of stress on your legs, and your muscles get tired, and so it's a strain going uphill. But going downhill is also a challenge too. But as I was going uphill, most of the way along the trail, the Appalachian Trail, the trail winds and goes up and down and winds back and forth. So you actually can only see for a few yards ahead before you can't really see where the trail is going. And as you're going up, and you can sort of see where the trail ends, it might look like, that might be the peak. And I finally reached the peak of this ascent that I'm currently on. And so you get hopeful. And then once you get up there, you realize that, oh, no, that's not the peak. It's actually a switchback, and you're actually going back that way, and you're going up even steeper. So when I first started hiking, it seemed like I kept thinking that whenever I see something, and 80-90% of the time, what I thought was going to be the top of my climb turned out to just be a switchback or something else that just prevented me from seeing how much higher I actually did have to go. So eventually, I ended up adopting the mindset that whenever I would see something that looked like it might be the peak of that ascent, I would tell myself that it's probably not, and I would say to myself, I talk to myself a lot when I'm on the trail alone, and I would say, well, there's always more up. And so, and most of the times once I got up there and realized, yep, indeed, there is more up to do, and I wasn't quite as disappointed. And then I would be delighted, if I actually did get up to one of those points and it turned out to be, okay, that's my peak for this climb. So, early on in my hike, that was a mistake I was making. I would find a point and think, oh, that's going to be the top of this climb, and then ultimately it wasn't, and then I would sort of get a little depressed. Now the downhills. Another mistake I made that, well, the downhills, those will be nice going downhill. However, if it's a really steep downhill, that can be even more challenging. In fact, the biggest problems I had with the hills actually came from the downhills, because that put a lot more stress, jarred my body a lot more, and a lot more stress on my knees. And in fact, the day that I hiked into the NOC, the Nantahala Outdoor Center, that was a big downhill hike almost most of the day. And by the time I got there, my knees were swollen up. They were almost like grapefruits, and I could barely walk. And I ended up actually taking a 0 there for my knees to recover. So I made the mistake of thinking, oh, downhill, that's going to be easy. No, not really. So, and then another area where I might say that I made a mistake was in food. I made a video before I left about how I thought one of my keys to success was going to be the fact that I tended to, and for the last few years, I've paid a lot more attention to my eating habits, and I've tried to eat healthy, avoiding processed foods and things like that. And then I admitted that it would be a lot tougher when I'm out on the trail, finding good food to eat. But there are options. However, a big mistake, once I got out on the trail, I started using that as an excuse to sort of eat whatever I wanted. You'd see all this great trail magic and stuff like that, and they would have like candy bars and stuff like that. And I sort of used the excuse of being on the trail for an excuse to indulge in some of the food that I knew was not going to be good for me, and that I didn't really have to eat. So I did that. Now, the last big mistake that I wanted to talk about, you've already seen it. It's my pups. Digger, Smoozer, you want to come? And now you can get the video if you want. Digger, Smoozer. Okay, here they are. These guys, I got them as pups. It's a long story, but basically, I moved to San Miguel de Allende here in Mexico back in September, and I knew that I was planning on hiking the Appalachian Trail. And so I was planning on adopting a dog, but I decided I probably should just wait until I've hiked the Appalachian Trail before I adopt another dog, so I didn't have to leave them for an extended period of time. But it's a long story, but I ended up with these guys when they were little pups like this, and I'm glad I did, but it wasn't a good deal leaving them as pups. I had a good friend house sitting, and she was taking care of them as pups. Well, when she first moved in, they were quite small, and when I left, she really was not a dog person. She's had cats and really didn't know what how to really train dogs and keep them in line. So when I got home, they were pretty crazy, but they're much better now. They're about 9 months old right now, but yeah, it's not advisable. I mean, it's tough even if they were mature dogs and old, leaving them for several months at a time. I think you really need to make sure that that they're well taken care of. And then little pups like that just was not a good idea for me to do. And to be perfectly honest, I was forced off the trail because of circumstances beyond my control. I had to get back here and take care of some business, and actually had to move into a new home. That was after I'd hiked 530 miles of the trail. I was somewhere in Virginia around Marion, I think is where the last place I stayed in Virginia before I headed home. And really, well, I definitely regret that this was a long time, over 20 years dream of mine to hike the trail. And I still am planning on getting back and hiking parts of it. But I want to make sure that what's happening at home is better taken care of before I leave and finish my hiking of the Appalachian Trail. But yeah, it was it wasn't a mistake. I'm really glad I've got these girls. This is Smoozer right here, and that's Digger right there in the love seat. And I'm really glad that I have them right now, and adopting them was not a mistake. But adopting them and leaving them for such a long time when they were pups was a mistake that I made. But it's all good now, right, girls? Yeah. So, yeah, those were the mistakes I made. Now, take everything that I've said with a grain of salt. In fact, it's my philosophy that I don't give advice. So this is just my perspective and my experiences. So I'm happy to share my perspective and my experiences. I mentioned that I was not an ultralight hiker, but just because I wasn't doesn't mean you might not want to try it, So the things that I have said is just my personal perspective, and you may hike your own hike. You may want to do things differently, but hopefully I've said something here today that if you're thinking about hiking the Appalachian Trail and you're preparing for maybe hiking in 2025, maybe I've said something here that will clue you in on the way you might want to plan and approach your hiking of the Appalachian Trail. So that's all I've got to say about that. There's a couple of other subjects that I want to address probably here in the near future. Now I'm here in San Miguel de Allende. There's a group of people that do a lot of day hiking in the mountains here of San Miguel, and in fact, it looks like on this Sunday I might be going on a hike with some of the people here on a hike, and I think it's the hike is going to be, San Miguel de Allende is over 6,000 feet. In fact, it's the same height as the highest point on the Appalachian Trail, which is Clingman's Dome. I actually my home is actually about 700 feet higher than Clingman's Dome. And the hike that I'm going to be taking this Sunday, I believe, I'll be going well over 7,000 feet, I think. So it should be an interesting hike, and I'll probably do a video about that. And then there's a couple of other things that are related to the Appalachian Trail that I want to do some short videos about. So that's it. That's all I've got for you right now. Happy trails. Say goodbye, girls.